What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have going on right now. We have our area of interest in the Caribbean Sea that over the last couple of days we have noticed a bit of a shift. Instead of the system potentially heading towards Haiti and the Dominican Republic and other parts of the Greater Antilles, this is now potentially going to be heading towards the Gulf of Mexico, and we have a lot to talk about right now as more data continues to come in. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. Here's the situation that we have pulled up for you right here. Here's what we got right now with a 40% probability of development in the next 7 days. A broad area of low pressure is likely to develop over the southwestern Caribbean Sea by the end of the week. Gradual development is possible thereafter, and a tropical depression could form over the weekend or early next week while the system drifts generally northward over the western or central Caribbean Sea. 40% probability in the next 7 days, so we're going to have to pay attention to that. Right now, still likely to develop according to the National Hurricane Center. They're still waiting for this system to organize and ramp up. The main question is, okay, when's this going to develop and where is this going to end up going? Because that's the main thing that we're looking at. We're not even going to be talking about intensity that much because we don't even know where the system's going to be tracking. But what I will say is we're seeing more of a shift towards the Western Caribbean Sea with the models and into the Gulf of Mexico with that as well. So if you're in Haiti and the Dominican Republic, you definitely should be watching this closely in case this pulls a fast one. But looks like the synoptic setup is now favoring a Gulf of Mexico type of storm over here, and we're going to have to wait and see how this will ultimately pan out. But what we have going on right now, let's go ahead and start up with some satellite imagery right here and do that very quickly. We're going to go ahead and move to the Western Atlantic right now. Here's what we have going on. Here's our little Central American gyre that's organizing right here off the coast of Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama right here. Definitely some more of that popcorning convection like I've been telling you about. Convection that fires up for a little bit and then dies down, fires up and then dies down. And that's what we're paying attention to right here, and this is where the system's going to be tagged. This is where the system's going to be moving to the north from. And if we go ahead and take a look at other factors such as water vapor imagery, definitely a lot more of a moisture infusion than there was previously. There's a lot more moist air in the Caribbean Sea now than there was yesterday, than there was 2 days ago, and when there was 3 days ago. So I just wanted to make that perfectly clear as we're seeing a lot of this convection kind of mixing out this dry air out here in the southeastern Caribbean Sea. So that's stuff we're going to have to watch as well, and we're going to have to watch as this does have the potential to impact a lot of people going forward, as it now puts Western Cuba in the line of fire. It now puts potentially the Yucatan in the line of fire, although I don't think it's going to go that far to the west. It now puts potentially Florida in the line of fire in the long term, and we are going to have to pay attention to that right now, especially as we are only 6 days away from Election Day in the United States for President, Congress, all the other stuff that we're paying attention to. So we're going to especially have to watch this very closely going forward. So here's the situation that we have going on in terms of the conditions that we're paying attention to. Let's go ahead and start with the global sea surface temperatures. SSTs continue to be as warm as ever in the Caribbean Sea, where the system is at right now. It's in an area of about 29 degrees Celsius of waters, more than enough fuel for this system to really organize and develop, which I have been kind of mentioning on and on. But what I will tell you is there has been a bit of a shift, and if it starts to move more to the west, it does enter this 30 degrees Celsius area of water right here off in the Western Caribbean, in the northwestern Caribbean especially, over here, and then heads towards Cuba. But if it does enter the Gulf, it won't have as much time to strengthen because the water temperatures around the coast are cooling quite rapidly as more fronts are pushing through, as cooler temperatures are continuing to push further and further to the south, and all of that's climatological stuff right there. So it's not going to have much time to organize and develop as it moves deeper into the Gulf of Mexico. Yes, there is still the loop current right there that could definitely generate some more intensification, at least in the short term. But as it gets closer to the coast, it's going to start weakening due to the cooler waters, as well as more wind shear, jet influence, all of that stuff over there. Now, on the contrary, if it continues and heads towards Jamaica, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic, it'll be over warmer waters, but it'll have less time to organize and develop, even though it'll have more fuel to do that in terms of theoretical fuel. I would say ocean heat content's definitely a lot higher in this part of the Caribbean than over here, but there's more ocean heat content at a lower value than there is over here. And we can go ahead and pull that up in just a second. But before we get to that, I do want to look at the climatological sea surface temperatures to kind of give you an idea of what we're looking at. As you can see, temperatures are continuing to plummet across the tropical Atlantic Ocean right here. In terms of other areas like the Hurricane Main Development Region, temperatures are starting to plummet as well, and which is kind of an indicative of a kind of a ending of the hurricane season coming up soon. And the Gulf of Mexico, look at this. Water temperatures have really collapsed in the last 3 weeks or so. Water temperatures starting around October, this is where they were around September 24th, just for context right here. And then you had Hurricane Helene move through, and then you had Milton and all that stuff. And the water temperatures, as well as all the fronts and all that stuff that's been moving through, have really plummeted quite a bit, dropping down to near average, actually, a near average anomaly around 27.55 degrees Celsius, which is about 81 degrees Fahrenheit, right there around 81.5 degrees Fahrenheit. It started to recover a little bit, but then it's dropping down even more. It's been really collapsing over the last little while, and we're going to have to continue to monitor the trends as well. So that's what we're paying attention to right there with the climatological stuff, as well as just kind of give you an idea of how much warm water we're looking at left for just the hurricane season and this area of interest to take advantage of. In the Caribbean Sea, it absolutely has a lot of OHC and a lot of warm water to take advantage of, as shown right here. This is the OHC map. We're actually going to go ahead and give you an updated one for October 30th. October 30th's updated map, a lot more OHC in the Caribbean Sea than there is in the Gulf of Mexico right here. Yes, the loop current is still going strong over here, but a little bit further to the east, and there's a massive drop-off in OHC because of the cooler waters and the continental shelf and all that stuff. So that's what we're paying attention to. But if it organizes and develops and quickly strengthens in the Caribbean Sea, then it's going to have a lot more of a chance to survive and maintain its intensity as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico. And that's something we're going to have to pay attention to. But as of right now, the Caribbean Sea is the hotspot for organization and development. And we're going to have a weakening system if it heads towards the Gulf Coast by the time it moves into the central Gulf of Mexico. So that's what we have with the ocean heat content right there. Once again, you still have that massive blob of OHC near Haiti and the Dominican Republic, as well as Jamaica right there. So if it does make a beeline towards those areas, then it's going to have a lot more fuel, but a lot less time to organize and develop. So that's something you're going to have to watch. Next thing we're showing you is the wind shear. Wind shear continues to be a persistent issue as of right now. There has been a little bit of calmer wind shear off the southwestern coast, southwestern Caribbean Sea coast over there. We do have a few areas a very large wind shear, 60 plus knots of wind shear, 90 knots of wind shear, but that is moving out of the Caribbean Sea. You're starting to see a ridge pattern organize and develop over here in the central United States. That's going to help lift a lot of this wind shear and ultimately give the system more time and more space to breathe. And that will be ultimately a good thing for the system, but a really bad thing for a lot of the other situations that we're watching as well. And we're going to have to pay attention to that as well. Let's go ahead and pull up the shear and the moisture forecast courtesy of the European run right here. Here's the 200 to 850 millibar wind shear from the 0Z run, pulling that up right here. As you can see, there is a bit of a trough moving through the Caribbean Sea and Gulf of Mexico. There is a ridge that's building up more and more across a lot of these areas, and there is going to be that trough that continues to dig down a little bit into the Caribbean Sea, but ultimately it won't really do that much in the long run. As in starting in the next 3 to 4 days, you're seeing all this wind shear start to exit the region as the system starts to organize and develop and move towards the Western Caribbean Sea. And what you have in front of it now is basically relatively low wind shear for pretty much from where it's expected to organize all the way through Cuba. There is some pockets of wind shear that we'll have to watch out for, and through about 3/4 of the Gulf of Mexico, the southern 3/4 of the Gulf, as the system continues to organize and develop, and as the ridge stays relatively put, at least in the long term right there. So we're going to have to pay attention to that as well. But regardless of that, still something to watch very closely, and we'll continue to update you as more information continues to come out. Let's go ahead and show you the moisture component to all of this. Moisture is going to be kind of interesting, as there has been a huge moisture infusion across a lot of the areas in the Gulf of Mexico and in the Caribbean Sea as of recently. However, we're going to have to watch what happens over the next few days as that trough continues to dig down and generally generates more dry air over there, and we're going to have to see how this whole system will pan out. But regardless of that, there is dry air that does move into the Caribbean Sea, generally a dry environment, but then you're seeing another moisture infusion really start to organize and potentially develop and head towards a lot of areas over there. So we're going to have to pay very close attention to that. There is a lot more moisture that does infuse into the eastern Gulf of Mexico. So if the system does enter that region right there, we're going to have to watch it going forward. But that's kind of the latest that we have in terms of the shear and the moisture from the European. I want to check GFS as well, just to kind of get a general gist of it as well. Here's what we have with the GFS. Moisture, GFS moisture, definitely a lot more moist than its European counterpart right there. The GFS, interestingly, still has this system heading further to the east, but we'll get more into depth of that later. But regardless of that, you still see a moisture infusion in the Western Caribbean Sea, not nearly as much dry air going forward, and then you potentially start seeing a dry air intrusion as it heads towards the Gulf Coast. And we'll talk more about kind of how the GFS has been playing with this in the near future. But taking a look at the wind shear, because that is also a very important factor, 200 to 850 millibar wind shear. Definitely the wind shear starts to decrease across much of the Caribbean Sea and Gulf of Mexico. And as the system is expected to enter there, it is going to help. The trough angle is definitely going to help with it in the short term. But depending on how much dry air affects the system will really depend on how the system will end up playing out and how many impacts the Gulf Coast will ultimately get. But pretty much, by and large, the further west the system goes, the more dry air the system is going to run into, and the more trouble it's going to get into, the more likely it's going to weaken at a very rapid rate. So we're going to have to watch, all things considered, going forward. But let's go ahead and now show you some ensemble runs, because these have been relatively interesting. Taking a look at these, we're going to go ahead and move the screen over a little bit, and we're actually going to go ahead and zoom out on this and then zoom in on this part of the Atlantic Ocean right here, just to give a general gist. Basically, what we've noticed, we're going to show you the 12Z runs from yesterday. Basically, what we've noticed is we've noticed a lot more of a shift towards the west, according to the ensembles. Before, you were having all these runs heading towards Haiti, Cuba, Jamaica. Now you have all these ensemble runs heading towards the west, towards Cuba, the Yucatan Peninsula, towards the Gulf of Mexico, and those areas right there. And what that's going to do is it's going to give the system more time to organize and develop, and we're going to have to pay very, very, very close attention to that going forward. And let's go ahead and show you the GFS run as well, the GFS ensembles. We'll show you the 0Z first and then go to the 12Z. Actually, never mind. We do have the 0Z runs pulled up as of right now. The 0Z GFS right now, generally a bit more scattered than the European, but you have noticed this shift of the majority of the ensemble runs more towards the west, towards the Gulf of Mexico, towards the Western Caribbean Sea. If we go ahead and pull up the 12Z ensemble runs, you're still seeing a lot more of that shift. You're seeing a lot more of a concentrated scenario where you're seeing more systems start to organize and develop, rather, not more systems, but rather more ensembles move towards the west than towards the east. So if you're in Haiti and the Dominican Republic, like I said at the beginning of this video, you're going to need to watch this very closely. But by and large, all the ensembles and all the models have shifted this greatly to the west, and we're going to have to continue to watch it very closely. I'm also watching some severe weather going on in the in the Midwestern United States, and I'll go ahead and give a brief update to what we're looking at. As of right now, we do have an enhanced risk of severe weather for those of you tuning in from those areas right there. If you're tuning in from Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Texas, all those areas right there, you are under a 10% hatched risk, you're under a 30% wind risk, and a 15% hatched hail risk right there as that trough continues to dig down. Matter of fact, if we go ahead and go back to the wind shear map over here, that trough and ridge that's kind of building up right there, that's what's also influencing the severe weather that's currently expected to go on across much of the Great Plains over there. So you're going to want to pay attention to that over there. But regardless of that, the main threat over there is wind and tornadoes. Wind, especially as the front starts to move through and we start to see a more squall line-ish scenario pull up as time continues to go on. So I figured I'd briefly talk about that as well before we get to the model runs for tropical meteorology, because I know that's what everyone's here to click on and that's what everyone wants to talk about. But I wanted to get the severe weather aspect of it out of the way because I know that was what's going on. And if we go ahead and show you the day 2 outlook for tomorrow, marginal risk from Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, all the way down to Texas. If we go ahead and go to the day 3, we have a marginal risk for parts of Texas and New Mexico over there. So that's kind of the latest overview in terms of severe weather. So a severe weather season starting up again, the second severe weather season that is. So remember, seek shelter immediately if a tornado warning has been issued, and that general stuff as well. And we'll continue to monitor that here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But let's go ahead and show you some model runs because I know I've been stalling long enough. So let's go ahead and start with the 0Z GFS. Just to kind of give a general gist of it, here's what the 0Z GFS had going on. Broad area of low pressure starts to organize and develop, heads towards Hispaniola, and then for some bizarre reason forms another low pressure system, or it's the same low pressure system but it's so broad that it's hard to see, that heads towards the Yucatan Peninsula. The GFS has not been very good with this system, I will say, especially the latest runs. 12Z GFS run hasn't been particularly that more impressive either. It has a little bit of a better handle on the run right here, but it has it heading toward, has it hitting Haiti and then swinging hard to the west, most likely due to the influence of the Bermuda High over here towards Cuba, organizes and strengthens to hurricane strength, then it heads towards the Gulf Coast and for some reason heads towards Texas and dissipates due to the dry air aspect of it. The GFS had a very weird handle with this tropical system, although the NHC's been very steady and very conservative with what's been going on, partly due to the fact that all these runs have been very haywire. But here's what we have with the CMC run. CMC has the system organizing and developing, first heading towards a little bit to the east, tapping into a lot of that OHC, and then heading towards the west as it continues to organize and develop into a Category 2, potentially Category 3 hurricane as it heads towards the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, and then potentially towards Florida right after that. So the CMC definitely has a better synoptic handle on this area of interest, and the 12Z continues to reflect that and continues to refine it quite a bit, has it organizing and moving towards that huge area of OHC, and then it continues to head towards Jamaica. Jamaica, you need to watch this very closely, as this could potentially impact you as well. I'm going to be talking to Weather Girl Danny about potentially watching this, as well as potential tips on how to handle this. I'm going to be reaching out to her after I'm done getting this video out to say, hey, what's going on? I haven't talked to you in a bit. We are seeing this area of interest. What are your thoughts on it? And just kind of brainstorm some stuff behind the scenes. So I'll let you know what we talk about afterwards. So yeah, there's that. And then the system heads towards the Yucatan, not the Yucatan, but towards the western tip of Cuba as a Category 2 hurricane, heads towards potentially Florida afterward, and that's what the CMC has going on for us right there. Last run I do want to check out of curiosity is the Icon run, and holy crap, the Icon is really giving a handle on this, as it really has it organizing and developing in a very rapid rate. Gets up to Category 3 strength with a pressure of 957 millibars. That's pretty interesting. What's the 0Z? 0Z definitely not as refined as the 12Z icon, but it really ramps up in intensity as it heads towards the Gulf Coast. So we're going to have to pay very close attention to all of these systems right here. And last one we'll show you is the Nav Gem. Even the Nav Gem has a decent handle on this system. Starts off broad, tightens up, and then becomes a tropical storm, and we're going to have to watch everything as more data and information continue to come in. But regardless of that, this is an evolving situation. Before we had the system heading towards Hispaniola. Now we're potentially having the system head towards the Gulf of Mexico. So it's a very quickly evolving situation that we're going to have to keep you updated on. We're going to have to keep tabs on. If you see a lot of these inconsistent model runs, it doesn't mean the system's not going to develop. It's just it doesn't have a good handle on the track of it or not. Even the NHC's models behind the scenes, I'm pretty sure, have the system developing pretty quickly. But ultimately, the track is will be refined in the next couple of days, and we'll continue to update you here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. With that being said, we're closing the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. It helps us out. It helps us get more people engaged with weather. And if you want to come hang out with us at Storms United, be sure to join the Discord server. Link will be in the end screen. Shout out to Daniel as an official sponsor of the Pat's Path Predictor Patreon. If you want to support the channel more directly, be sure to join the Patreon. It's first link in the description down below. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.